So in this video we are doing lesson 6. 1 through 3 at the beginning takes us through a review of how to simplify radical functions. So for 18, we're going to split this up as much as possible. So we're going to have 2 and 9, because 2 times 9 gives me 18. Now I can simplify or break up 2 into 2 times 1, but that's really not going to help me because that multiply by 1 is not going to do anything when I try to simplify further. Now 9 I can split up 3 times 3. Again, the 3's can't be broken up anymore, just like the 2's, or the 2. Now, what this tells me is that these 3 numbers are going to go into the radical. So 2 times 3 times 3. If you put it in your calculator or think about it, 2 times 3 times 3 gives you 18. Well, I see a pair of the same numbers, so they get married, move out front or out of the house. So I have 3 on the outside and 2 is left in the inside. So my answer to number 1 is 3 times the square root of 2. Now for number 2, I've got the square root of 72. With the square root of 72, I'm going to break up 72 and figure the primes. So I'm going to go with the easy one. Yes, there's multiple ones that you can choose, but if you are drawing a blank, see that it ends with 2, so I know it's even, so 2 has to go in there. So 2 times 36 gives me 72. 2 can't be broken up anymore. 36 can. So 36 I can break up again using this simple one. It ends with a 6, so I know it's even. 2 times 18. And then we're using the same kind of numbers that we used in the first one. For 18, I know it ends with an 8, so I know 2 goes into it. So 2 times 9 gives me 18. And 3 times 3 gives me 9. If you need to circle the bottom of the roots every single time, do so please. And all of the ones at the bottom of the roots, I'm going to put under the square root. So I have 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. So I took everything at the bottom of the roots and put it under the radical. I see a pair of 2's, they get married, move out of the house. I see also a pair of 3's, they get married and move out of the house. So I have 2 times 3 times the square root of 2 because 2 was left over. A2 was left over. This stays as multiplication in between the 2 pairs. So 2 times 3 gives me 6 times the square root of 2. And that is my answer. Now I'll move on to 80. Now you could start with the 2 just like we did with 72 and 18. Or you could see that this ends with a 0, so I can start with 10. So what times what gives me 80? 8. And then separating 10 out, I have 2 and 5. With 8, I have 2 and 4. And with 4, I have 2 and 2. I cannot simplify any of the end of the roots anymore. So I put them under the radical. So I have 2 times 5 times 2 times 2 times 2. Now I'm circling the pairs of numbers. So I have 2 2's right there, so they get married, move out. I have 2 2's right here, they get married, move out. So I have 2 times 2 times the square root. The only number that was left over was 5, so 5 stays in the house. And then 2 times 2 gives me 4 times the square root of 5. So up here, my answer is 4 times the square root of 5. Now we're going to go on to the beginning of this lesson specifically. At times we must simplify radical functions that are in a form of a rational equation. The process of simplifying radical functions that are in a form of a rational equation is called rationalizing. The denominator. So for number 1, under rationalizing the denominator, we have 2 over the square root of 7. To get this radical out of the denominator, we're going to multiply by the square root of 7 over the square root of 7. Now, in the numerator, we just multiply like normal. So 2 times the square root of 7. In the denominator, we actually have the square root of 7 times the square root of 7. So simplifying this out, we have the square root of 7 squared. We've already talked about this in other lessons, but when we want to get rid of a radical, we square it. So when we took the square root of 7 multiplied by itself, the square root actually went away. So this equals 7. So in our problem, in the denominator, we have 7. So our answer is 2 times the square root of 7 over 7. We're going to use the same concept for all of these. So for number 2, we have 4 over the square root of 5. We want to get rid of the square root over that 5, so we're going to multiply by the square root of 5 over the square root of 5. Now, the reason why we're being able to do this is because any number divided by itself is just 1. So essentially, we are multiplying by 1. And that is not changing the value of this. It is just changing the appearance of it, so we don't have to deal with a radical in the denominator. So in the numerator, we have 4 times the square root of 5. And then in the denominator, we have the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, or the square root of 5 squared. And we're left with 5. So we have 4 times the square root of 5 over 5. Now in number 1 and number 2, we cannot simplify these because we're looking at 2 and 7. Nothing goes into 2 and 7 evenly. In between 4 and 5, we can't simplify that as well. Now for 3. 3, we have 8 over the square root of 10. We're going to multiply by the denominator, square root of 10 over the square root of 10. And we're left with 8 times the square root of 10 over 10. Now for this one, we have 8 and 10. We can simplify this. So both of these are even, so I'm going to start with the easy one, and 2 can go into both of them. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. When I'm simplifying, I do not simplify this square root. Cannot simplify the square root unless there was another square root at the bottom with the same thing. So I have the square root of 10 still. And we're dividing by 2, so 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now looking at this 4 and 5, can we simplify this further? No. So we have 4 times the square root of 10 over 5. Now pause the video and try 4 and 5. You should have gotten something similar to these. If you did not, try again and come into class or ask me over email. So now we're going on to 30, 60, 90 right triangles. The hypotenuse of all right triangles are the opposite of the right or 90-degree angle. Short leg is the opposite of the 30-degree angle, and the longest leg is opposite of the 60-degree angle. So what this looks like is that we have our right triangle, and no is not to scale, and we're going to have 30 degrees and 60 degrees. Now, with these special right triangles, and 30, 60, 90 is a special right triangle, there is a certain ratio or a certain relationship in between all of our sides. So here's in words what this relationship looks like. So starting with the short leg is going to equal x. The long leg is multiplying the short leg by 2, by the square root of 3, my bad. So when we're finding the long leg, we're going to our short leg and multiplying by the square root of 3. Our hypotenuse is twice the length of the short leg. So what this ratio looks like, and I'm going to draw my right triangle again. We've got 60, 30. So our short leg is across from our 30 degrees. So our short leg is over here, and it's going to be x. Now our longest leg is opposite of our 60 degrees. So here's my 60 degrees, here's my long leg. Now according to our relationship, our long leg is multiplying the short leg, which is x, by the square root of 3. So my long leg is going to be x times the square root of 3. And then my hypotenuse is twice the length of the short leg. So I've got hypotenuse is 2 times x. So given this, we're going to find a few missing values. So for number 1, if you need to, go ahead and say that this is 30 degrees. Now if you did not know that we were looking at 30, 60, 90 degree angles or triangles, then you could have added 90 plus 60 and subtracted it from 180 and got 30. Now the 5, is it the short leg, long side, or longest leg, or the hypotenuse? It's the short leg because it is across from the 30 degrees. So here's my short leg. And I know it's confusing with x being one of the missing values, but I'm going to continue using short leg for x. So if that messes you up, please go ahead and change it to a different letter. Now, I'm going to find my longest leg. And I'm just going to put long. So my longest leg is x times the square root of 3. So I've got, instead of x, I've got 5 times the square root of 3. Now, if you don't have your calculator, you can use Desmos or your phone calculator. So in Desmos, you clear out whatever you've done so far. And you've got 5 times the square root of 3. Now, in these examples, it does not tell you have to have the exact value or the decimal, but I'm going to keep it as 5 times 3 because I want it to be the exact value instead of a rounded decimal. But if you wanted to put 8.7 or 8.66, that's fine as well. So for our longest side, we just have 5 times the square root of 3. And then for x, our hypotenuse, we have 2 times x. So 2 times 5 instead of x, and we get 10. So we're asked what is x side, which was 10, and our y side, which was 5 times the square root of 3, or 8.7. For number 2, we're given 30 degrees, so we want to come over here and put our 60 degrees. Now this at 6 times the square root of 3 is across from 30, so we've already got our short side, which is x. Now we want to find our long side and our hypotenuse. Well, our long side, again, is across from our 60 degrees, and it is x times the square root of 3. So we've got 6 times the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. Now, if you need to write it out. If you want to use a calculator, you can use your calculator. But in this is saying 6 times the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. Well, this right here is the same as saying the square root of 3 squared. Well, the square root of 3 squared is just 3. So we have 6 times 3, which is what? 18. So this long side is going to equal 18. Now for the hypotenuse, which is m in this case, we've got our short side, which is x. So we've got 6 times the square root of 3. We're going to multiply it by 2. Well, this one, you have to only do 2 times 6. So we've got 2 times 6, which is 12 times the square root of 3. So you're only doing what is on the outside of the radical. Or you can find the decimal. If you put it in your calculator, the decimal would be 20.8. So we're asked what is m, and I'm going to put 12 times the square root of 3. You could put 20.8, and my n is 18. So we're going to go on to page 16. Page 16, number 3 for lesson 6. So we're given angle 60. So we know our other one is 30 degrees. The side across from 30 is our short side. So we've got x. Now we're going to figure out our long side and our hypotenuse. Our long side is short side times the square root of 3, which is just 45 times the square root of 3. And then our hypotenuse is 2 times our short side, which is 90. So our x is 90. Our y is either 45 times the square root of 3, or if you put it in your calculator, it was 77.9. Now for number 4. Number 4 goes a little bit deeper. So we've got 30. We're going to go ahead and write 60 degrees so we know what is our short and our long side. Our short side is across from 30. We don't know our short side this time. Our long side we still don't know as well. But this time we're given our hypotenuse. So now I'm going to figure out what our short side is. And yes, I'm continuing to use x as our short side so it can match what our note says. So when we're talking about our hypotenuse, it is 2x. So I want to figure out what x is so I can take my short side and figure out my long side as well. So I want to figure out what x is. So I've got 2x equals 40. I'm going to divide by 2 to get x by itself, and I've got x equals 40 divided by 2, which is 20. So my hypotenuse side is still 40, but I had to use that 40 to get the relationship in between the hypotenuse and the short side to figure out what the short side measured. So my x is 20. Now my long side. My long side, again, is x times the square root of 3. So I'm taking 20 times the square root of 3. Now you can either use 20 times the square root of 3, or the decimal is at 34.6. So the problem's asking for the long side, which they use x for, so 20 times the square root of 3, or 34.6. And then my y is actually my short side for this problem, and it's 20. So try numbers 5 and 6 and pause the video. You should have gotten something similar to this for number 5. For number 6, you should have gotten something similar to this. Now for number 7. Number 7 kind of mixes it up one more time. So we have our 60. We're going to write our 30 degrees. We have our hypotenuse across from our right angle. We don't know our short side, but we do know our long side. And this is where the rationalizing comes in. So I want to figure out what my x is, or my short side is. So I've got to figure out what x was to create this 5 times the square root of 3. So I've got x times the square root of 3 equals 5 times the square root of 3. I've got to divide by the square root of 3. I've got to divide by the square root of 3. So any number divided by itself is just 1. So I'm left with x equals 5 times the square root of 3 over square root of 3. Now, there is a simpler way to solve this, but I'm going to use the skill of rationalizing this fraction. So I've got the square root of 3. So I'm going to multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is essentially square root of 3 squared. The square root goes away, so I'm left with 3 in the denominator. The same thing happens in the numerator. I still have this 5, but the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is just 3. Now I'll simplify. Again, there is a simpler way, and I will tell you in a second how you could have done this, but I wanted you to go through the steps of this. 15 times 3 gives you 15, and you're still left with 3 in the denominator. Now 15 divided by 3 is 5. Now going back to what we originally said, x equals 5 times the square root of 3 over 3, any number divided by itself is what? 1. So we could have stopped here and said x equals 5. But if it did not cancel out, we would have continued to go through all the way until we could not simplify any further. So our long side is 5 times the square root of 3. Our short side, now we know, is 5. And our hypotenuse is 2 times our short side, which is 10. So our A in this problem is our hypotenuse, which is 10. And our B is our X, or our short side, which is 5. Now take time to try 8 and 9. For 8, you should have gotten something similar to this. For 9, you should have gotten something similar to this. So I'm going to do number 1, and then you're going to try number 2 and 3. So we've got 30. So our missing angle is going to be 60. Our short side is across from our 30. So our short side is given. Our hypotenuse is 2 times our short side, which is just 2. And our long side is our short side times the square root of 3, which is just the square root of 3. So my u in this problem is 2. My v in this problem is the square root of 3. So pause the video and try number 2 and 3. You should have gotten something similar to this for number 2. For number 3, you should have gotten something similar to this.